Nope, the channel ain't dead. I've just been building a shed. Or should I say a new recording studio / production and editing suite / music room / new home for this channel. I've also been doing a lot of other stuff, but that's besides the point. So let's jump into turning this typical shed into a comfortable workspace. For the cost conscious out there, I will have a running total of the build in the top right corner throughout this video. So first things first, I looked up how big of a shed I could build without getting a building permit. And at 200 square feet, that meant I could make a pretty good size 12 by 16 foot structure. Then I checked out prices from local shed companies as well as the tough sheds that Home Depot sells, and my hopes and budget were immediately shattered. Local quotes were around the $15,000 to $16,000 area, and the Home Depot options were just too small or unable to be customized without ridiculous add-on costs. So as most frugal endeavors go, I turned to Craigslist and eventually found a builder who was just starting out with a new business, looking for work, and was very cheap, like 60% less than the competition cheap. Now, a bit of caution should be in place if you choose to go down this road, because you run the risk of hiring somebody without experience, somebody who might scam you or abandon you halfway through a project, or somebody who has extreme unknown character flaws. I knew I was taking a pretty big risk, but it being my only option besides doing it all myself, I decided to trust my gut and go for it after meeting the guy from Craigslist. Lucky for me, he was trustworthy and did a good job. So getting this started in the winter makes plotting the land a little difficult due to the snow, but I think I ended up in a good spot. The first day, the basic platform is finished. The progress seems a little slow, but over the next few days, the skeleton is really coming into shape. While a few big windows and maybe a skylight would be awesome, it definitely wouldn't be awesome for music production. Windows are always a compromise when building a music studio due to the sound transmission and acoustical interference that they impart. So I'm settling on one good-sized double window on one long side of the building, with a plan on how to mitigate the acoustical interference, which I'll build later on in the video. With the general shed done, it's now my turn to make this into a comfortable space with the right climate for my equipment. So first, I'm sealing off the creases and the crevices with caulking and spray foam sealant. By the way, my experience tells me that the Great Stuff gaps and crack spray works a lot better than Loctite tight foam. As you can see in the picture, the 2 cans of tight foam that I bought quickly turned to garbage before I even got halfway through the cans. Up next, since I don't want this place to feel like a backyard treehouse in the summertime, I'm creating a rafter vent system across the ceiling to allow proper airflow. This is an inexpensive addition, and it really helps climate-related issues. Now we're moving on to insulation. The question is mineral wool, also called rock wool, or fiberglass. Since rock wool is heavier and denser than fiberglass, it does stop a little more sound from traveling through a wall, but its cost to effectiveness ratio is out of whack. Since I'm not sharing any walls with my neighbors, I don't need to worry about sound transmission as much. And even if I were, rock wool bats these days are roughly more than twice as expensive as fiberglass is per square foot, and they only take the decibels transmitted through a wall down by about 5 or 6 on their own, which might be worth it for you if you're packed in next to a neighbor, but the low bass frequencies are tougher to tame, and they're still going to pass through a wall at a higher level. If you really want to keep your sound to yourself, then you'd be looking at building a room inside of the original room, with a raised floor and an air gap between the walls, which, aside from being expensive, would also significantly reduce the size of the room that you're left to work with. So in the end, I'm going to stick with fiberglass rolls for the inside of the walls, and then take advantage of the denseness and rigidity of rock wool for the acoustical absorptive panels and the drum set riser, both of which I'll be building soon. But first, I gotta lift this 5/8 inch thick, heavy Type X drywall and screw it into place. Then I need to take a long nap. Okay, so I've done a mediocre job putting joint compound on the walls and covering the drywall seams. I'm not going to drywall the ceiling, the insulation is doing its job just fine. However, later on I will be covering the ceiling in fabric for aesthetic reasons. Due to the weather, the compound is taking a very long time to dry, so in the meantime I've started building the drum set riser. As you can see, it's 2 pieces of plywood that I cut into the shape of a quarter circle, and it's supported by 2x4s every 2 feet or so. The reason for building this is not just for appearances. I'm making this riser in order to isolate the drums from the rest of the structure, which will help keep its low end solid. I certainly won't be recording any cavernous sounds in this room, but I should be able to get some nice dry and punchy drum recordings when I'm done. Now that the joint compound is finally dry, it's time to prime the drywall for paint. Since this place is going to be used for filming as well, I'm going with black paint so that any lighting will be directional and deliberate. With a fresh coat of paint on the walls, I'm going to start laying down the peel and stick flooring. I originally bought this because at 97 cents per square foot, it's inexpensive, but it actually looks surprisingly good. They say that you don't need to use an underlayment, meaning the red foam underneath the floor panels, with peel and stick flooring. However, I'm really glad that I went with it anyways because it helps by leveling off inconsistencies in the floor, of which there are many in a shed build, and it also provides a better stick to the panels in my opinion. It's going down easy, but it is an all-day project. Now that we have the floor done, I'm packing the drum riser with the rock wool and using scrap 2x4s to strengthen it a little bit more. It's not pretty, but it will be effective. I've attached a blue carpet to the top of it, making sure that the kick drum won't be moving anywhere, and I have a plan to cover the front with a rubber basing later on. Well, it's starting to take shape with some gray weathered barn-style molding where the ceiling meets the drywall, and the insulation on the ceiling is covered with this inexpensive yet opaque black fabric. It'll look even better after some of those wrinkles are stapled back and the yet-to-be-built ceiling cloud is installed over the mix position. And that's a good segue to get to work building some acoustic panels. Acoustical treatment is going to be specific to your room shape and dimensions, but here's my plan for treating my room. As you can see, it's basically a hasty sketch that I made in about 20 seconds. It's really just here to remind me of how many and of which type of panels I need to make. Since I've done this kind of thing before in pretty much every house, apartment, and garage I've lived in, I know generally what I'm looking for. I say generally because until you have all of your equipment and furniture in your room, you won't know exactly how far to go with acoustical treatment, or if on the other hand, you've gone too far. The job of most acoustic panels is to absorb sound so that there aren't too many fluttery, slapback, or early reflections in a room. But there's arguably nothing worse than a room that sounds too dead, meaning that there's too much absorption on the walls or elsewhere. If there is, then the room starts to sound fatiguing, or maybe even a little worse, like a creepy padded cell. Not that I would know. Anyways, you can save a substantial amount of money by building your own panels, and it's easy to customize them to fit your room and make them look however you want. Most of the panels that I'm making are 2 feet by 4 feet absorption panels, but I'm also making 2 custom 4x4s for the side walls, one of which is noteworthy because I plan on turning it into a sort of movable wall to cover the window when I need to. I will show this at the end of the video. I'm also making 1 absorptive ceiling cloud, as I've already mentioned, as well as a polycylindrical diffuser on the back wall. Diffusers are the opposite of absorptive panels. It's their job to scatter reflections as opposed to absorbing them. This helps to avoid the noticeable early reflections that I've already mentioned, while also keeping your room lively and possibly helping it sound larger than it actually is. Generally, my panels are made with readily available materials from the Home Depot or Lowe's. I use 2x4 wood frames packed with 3.5-inch deep rock wool cut to size. Then the rock wool is wrapped in a thin painter's tarp to keep its particulate from entering the room. The rock wool is either placed directly on the frame, or if the application calls for it, I'll rest them or spray glue them to a plywood or particle board backing. For mostly aesthetic reasons, I'll then add acoustic foam squares or a few layers of burlap, because burlap is an acoustically transparent fabric. The foam squares are of the type that you can find widely available for a low price on Amazon, and while they look nice, they don't do much in terms of sound absorption on their own, but they do absorb the higher frequencies. Then, a lot of the frequencies that pass through the foam is absorbed by the rock wool, avoiding those frequencies from bouncing off the wall, which is the main goal here. After the rock wool, I always include at least a 2-inch air gap between the back of the panel and the wall. Decoupling the panel from the wall in this way absorbs even more low-end frequencies. But of course, these panels can't offer full absorption. As with any acoustical panel, the amount of frequency absorption starts to taper off the further down the frequency spectrum you travel. Generally speaking, these types of panels absorb pretty good down to around 200 Hz, and then steeply roll off in the bass frequencies. However, that's good performance for a wall panel, and even better than a lot of the more expensive pre-built options. They do take some time to build, but in the end you're looking at about a 7-inch depth of interdependent or harmonious absorptive qualities per panel. Some of these panels will be pulling double duty as guitar hangers, so I will include a plywood backing for extra reinforcement on those. To top some of these panels off, I found some weathered wood strips at Home Depot. As opposed to staining all of the wood, I think they actually look pretty nice. To hang the panels, I use D-rings. I'm using 75-pound rated wall anchors with a washer and 55-pound rated aluminum wire to hang most of the panels. However, the 4x4s are going to require some more reinforcement. Now, like I said, all of these panels do a good job down to around 200 Hz or a little below that. But what about the lower bass frequencies? Well, that's where bass trapping comes into play. I'm not going to talk too much about bass trapping right now because treating lower frequencies, especially those below around 150 Hz, is difficult to do in what would be considered a smaller mixing environment. If I were to build an ideal mixing room, then it would be like 27 feet wide by around 40 feet long. However, that doesn't mean that you can't get great sounding mixes in a smaller room. One of the rooms that I worked in particular was set up in a way that would frustrate even a novice acoustician. But there was some great stuff turned out of that room. Some songs that you might even know. So dealing with the low end in this room will be a process of listening over a period of time and then either learning the shortcomings or addressing them with a room measurement mic if they pose too much of an issue. However, I have treated the obvious corners of my room with heavier 27-pound versions of my acoustic panels. I stack 2 on top of each other from the floor to the ceiling, which is a good start. Now I'm going to take all of the leftover rock wool and fiberglass from the construction, stuff it into trash bags, and throw them behind the panels to add some more mass. Like the bottom drum riser, this is a very unattractive solution, but nobody will ever see it, so nobody will ever know. Wow, now things are really starting to take shape. But I'm low on funds, and I need some speaker stands. Not ideal, but I do have a solution. If you're interested in turning cheap speaker stands into something much, much better, click the link at the end of the video or right here, and I'll provide steps. So with the stands ready to go and the ceiling cloud hanged over my mix position, I can move in my desk, my instruments, my recording gear, and get to work. But wait, what about that movable wall I mentioned earlier? Well, here it is. I took an 8-foot sliding barn door hardware kit and attached 2 heavy acoustic panels with 5/8-inch thick particle board backing. I got the kit for about $50 on Amazon, which saves you more than half of what you'd pay at Home Depot. Then I attached 2 casters where the panel meets the wall for easy sliding, and then sealed it off with foam weather stripping for good measure. It works great at keeping the sound in when I want it to, and makes an awesome absorption panel as well. And of course you need a custom cut window shade behind the panel. Last things last, I have made a custom cut heavy soundproofing panel on the door, hanging it with a metal French cleat rated for 100 pounds from Home Depot. So here's the finished project. A skeleton of a shed turned into pretty much the best space that I can think of making. I hope this video has helped you or entertained you in some way, and of course if it has, then please like and subscribe to the channel for more stuff. And comment if you've got something to say. Would you have gone a different way than I did? I'd love to hear about it. Thanks very much, and I'll see you next time.